So I trust we are live now. Making sure that we're live, making sure we're visible, making sure also we're not too late.
Yeah.
So better be early than late. So I started the broadcast a minute earlier.
All right.
I'll wait another few seconds just for the time to actually so for people to actually log in on time as opposed to too early. We don't want to be too early. Okay, so another 5 seconds, and there we go. Lala, thank you very much for making it today to the broadcast. I just
Thank
wanted
you,
to
Ania.
say that today we will continue our discussion from the podcast number 1. I will come back to this point. I just wanted to say that Professor Lian is not feeling well today. He really tried very hard to make it today. Unfortunately, he couldn't. He had to have some tests done. And Dr. Tsai wanted very much to be part of this broadcast. He sent his PowerPoint and his discussion points to Professor Lian. Dr. Tsai couldn't make it because of the restrictions that apply in China. We're fully aware that Chinese citizens find it a little bit difficult to join us on global networks like Facebook or YouTube, and it just didn't work out this time. However, we do have input from Dr. Tsai, and we will go into details about his work with Professor Lian once Professor Lian returns, which will be in 2 weeks. So, by all means, please, everyone, use the comments for giving us feedback, sending us questions. If you hear something relevant and you would like to underscore, by all means, take notes, write to us. Also, if you find something problematic, if you do not agree with things we say here, by all means, send us, hello, Professor Yazid, send us an email. I'm just writing now my Gmail account so that you can contact us and send us your comments, send us articles. If you would like us to review some articles, send them to us and we will do this. Okay? So we really want to make these broadcasts an interaction between the intellectual groups that we invite here and also between colleagues who are watching us and not necessarily want to participate directly as guests, but would like to ask questions or have requests that you would like us to address. We're very happy to do that. So we will be returning to the discussion board. As you can see, you can write actually comments. So I see them. We both see them. And we, at the end of the broadcast or during the broadcast, we will actually address your points. So today, last week, we talked about planning the curriculum. And all was going well until we actually went through the literature review and we found out that we couldn't fix the curriculum during one broadcast. We did prolong the broadcast. It did last probably, 2 hours, but it wasn't enough. That's right, Lala. It wasn't enough, right? It wasn't enough because one of my PhD students has found an article that explained all the things that need to be present and considered when planning a curriculum. And that gave us a headache. It turned out that we need to consider some more than just the best idea that popped into my head. I used to think that teaching was just a heuristic thing. Well, it worked, so I'll do it. But now there's enough of research, and our profession became a bit more intellectualized, theorized, and analyzed. And now we learn that there's a lot responsibility involved when working with students. So we decided today that we might focus on the critical perspective of curriculum planning. Critical, which will be about focusing on the question, which is, how do I know that this would be a good thing? Right? So I want to do this. How do I know that this would be a good thing to integrate or to do when I'm teaching? So you all have your own thoughts now, why you do particular things. But our student says you actually have to do a lot of work in that critical perspective that informs your curriculum planning. A lot of work. So I don't think, just to say to everyone for today, I don't think we will solve all the problems. We will start talking about the critical perspective, and today we will lay out a little bit of foundation, and we will go into practical solutions for integrating evidence in order to inform teaching strategies. We will do it during our next broadcast. Today, it's just not enough time. People write books about it, right? People write lots of articles about it, books about it. So in one broadcast, we just can't cover it all. But we will try to address the critical perspective today, continue next broadcast, and then if we cover enough, then we'll move to the political perspective, which is the relationship between the choices we make based on evidence, and then also how it responds to current policies. We will invite guests that have expertise in that relationship between the curriculum and the policies, and we'll have a discussion on that. And then we'll talk more about so what, which is the generative perspective, right? So you've got all this evidence, you've got all these tools, you've got all of these relationships worked out, right? Is it working? Is it working for you? Is it working for the students? Is it working for policies and tests? Right. So these things we will want to flesh out. So you can see we've got lots of broadcasts.
You're
Now,
right.
we don't intend to stop. I think there will be always topics to cover.
Yeah.
So this is our agenda for today. If you wanted to know who are these people on the picture, that's Amy Norman, a teacher from Darwin, also my student. And she's here with two volunteers who are supporting Asia Call Conference in Taiwan. So at Charles Darwin University, we had funding for students who did really well in coursework masters programs. And Amy did very well, and she got herself money to go to Taiwan for a conference, and she was doing lots of networking, as you can see.
Oh, awesome.
So, yes, so here's our agenda for today. So we want to look at the concept of critical perspective, which is about making informed choices between teaching paradigms. That's why I framed the title of our today's broadcast as Which Teaching Approach? I would like to do it this way. So I would like to I would like to categorize approaches as frames of reference. So here we have one approach, there we have another approach, there we have another approach, each framed within a particular perspective on the student, on learning, and other things that matter, right? So a critical perspective requires us to make these differentiations and compare, contrast, and choose. Right, so you could use techniques from an approach A in an approach C, but for different reasons, for the reasons that the approach C allows, not the approach A, right? So that's the thing. So we will look today, we have the same pretty much structure as we had in the first broadcast. So the first question we will look at is, why analyze a teaching approach? Why not just do it? Then we will examine what's the problem, right? What's the key problem in currently used teaching methods, right? We want to actually focus our broadcast today. What's the problem? What's bugging us that we created this broadcast, other than the framework for the curriculum? Then we will talk about the process, or where we're looking for evidence, why, and then we will look at which evidence helped us do what and how it was utilized. And we will talk about the impact on students' learning. Now, this is really two broadcasts. We will not cover all these points today. I presume we'll cover 1, 2 mainly, quite a lot. So I'll just have a look what I have in my next slide, because I don't remember. Right. So I might actually first begin with Lala.
Yes.
And ask Lala to help us understand better, from his perspective, from the perspective of his studies and his experience, to help us better understand why it is important to analyze an approach, which is point 1 of our agenda. Lala, let us know.
All right. Thank you very much, Ania. Well, we had a very exciting talk last week, and I think we're gonna have a even more exciting talk today. All right, so we've been highlighting one particular issue, actually, from my perspective as an educator in Indonesia. So, in the last 1 decade, as have been pointed out by Indonesian scholars like Suratmo and Professor Al-Wasila, we are witnessing lower or poorer quality of education in Indonesia based on many assessment frameworks, and I think that's a big problem. And in the meeting with Professor Andrew Lian last week, we also highlighted the fact that the EPI index, like 64 points, drop in the last 10 years in Indonesia is not a good one. So I think there is a new problem emerging here, and at the moment we have to ask ourselves, does our teaching approach actually work well or no? So when we ask this question, it's like, did we actually apply the proper strategy in playing certain football games or soccer games? So I think that's the very reason why we have to analyze our teaching approach. And then last year, when I returned to Indonesia, actually we had a formal instruction from the government that our teaching should be research based. But then the question is, what is actually research based teaching look like? And an answer actually popping up from my colleague dealing with the quality assurance work. She said that, well, you simply put some new references. Maybe you can use the latest research of your own research and other people's research into your syllabus. Well, that's the formal curriculum document that we have at the moment. But then the big question is, does it actually help us to understand better the nature of learning? Because if we cannot have impacts in our teaching, it means that we have somehow, failed, right? So yes, I think the very first question that you ask is very fundamental for us to answer at the moment, Ania. So that's my point, Ania.
Yeah, because I think that it's worth us setting up the context for our discussion, because either we take it for granted why we should evaluate an approach, or we already have some beliefs that
Mm,
maybe either do it, just for accountability and in terms only of references, or
right.
right. So what I liked about your point was that yes, we have tests, and yes, I'm all for um, research that examines the value of those tests.
Yep.
But criticizing the tests alone is not solving our problem. Just because the
Mm,
test might be biased, just
right.
because the test might not actually consider differences, student differences, local differences, it doesn't mean that we should not actually look at ourselves. So I've done work, obviously, where I actually read. I mean, it required from me to read text or research about the bias in tests. But there
Yep.
is this two way. This is a two-way thing.
Mm,
It could be a problem with tests, but it could be also a problem with us. And the stronger we are, the more arguments we have, the more we can stand up and
right.
defend our own teaching, defend
Yep.
what we're doing, and also maybe affect the tests, have an input to the way tests are designed. Blaming testing alone is not solving a problem.
Yep.
I also felt when I was reading other people's research on tests and their biases, I felt there
Mm,
was a lot of criticism, but the solutions were not forthcoming.
yep. Yep.
And teachers need solutions, and researchers need to support teacher educators who are researchers and whose job is to prepare teachers for schools and continue working with teachers in schools. As I say it, we need to do some work in order to give teachers what I call strong legs. That they stand
Mm,
on strong legs. In Thailand, the hind legs, the legs of a
yep.
of an
Yep.
elephant, to
Elephant.
stand on something strong, as opposed to just have this tennis game. You say, I say, you say, I say.
Yep. Yep.
So obviously, when you create podcasts like this, or any presentations you make, you have to read a lot and you have to prepare yourself quite a lot. You will talk about, say, 1% of all the issues you have read, researched, and know. So I've done some work on the issue why analyze a teaching approach. And I was listening to this particular lecturer from Yale. He was talking about psychology. But what struck me was his point that learning anything implies change.
Right.
He said that um, basically as an obvious thing, and he moved on. But it got stuck
Mm,
in my head, change. Because then actually he did make a point, which is we are
mm,
change blind. And I will make more points in this regard. But we all know from our own perspectives. For example, when we learn English, sometimes our collocations are not right. Our
yep.
accent is
Yep.
present. It's very hard to combat accent to the point that we are fully comprehensible. Not
Right.
just to an English speaker. Forget that. English speakers understand even when we speak under the ground. But we are in a globalized world where an Indonesian person talks to an Australian person born in Poland,
Mm,
right? We have Asian committees where nobody is English. I mean, we Singapore people, right? So we have a Thai person talking to a Cambodian person. So we want to reach particular level of comprehensibility, and it's hard. So we've produced by now a lot of research justifying why we shouldn't care.
Mm.
So here I am not going to discuss it, although I could, but we will bring here Professor Lian, not today, but in 2 weeks' time. He will tell us all what he thinks about it. But I know from my professional contacts in Asia, especially in Southeast Asia, where one speaker spoke at the ASEAN meeting and another person asked the person questions. So first of all, nobody understood what the person said. And the person who spoke never understood the question. And it sort of went like, and thank God we have this Asian politeness where everybody bowed.
Smiles and
Yeah,
bow their head.
we moved on. So, right. So we are change blind. Let's have a look at that concept. So I just want to set up the context of the concept of an approach to learning or to teaching and learning. What are the obstacles? So this is a famous research. And one of the things I will make in the next point is that a lot of this research is well known everywhere in the world, except for second language teaching or foreign language teaching, especially English language teaching. This is just not present. We kind of think it is irrelevant. So whether it's relevant or not, that's a matter for another discussion, maybe not today. But let's have a look about this as being blind to change. That's why we have this filter or whatever you call it that makes us speak with our native accents, or that makes us understand concepts or words differently than, say, someone else would. And our collocations are not just off the mark, but really like we use English words to speak our own language, right? So we're incomprehensible semantically. So we are change blind, and there's been a lot of research done that actually led people to conclude it. So this was one of the funniest research studies. Now I've done it with my Cambodian students. So whoever is from Cambodia and used to be my master's student, they know exactly about this study. So I had about 21 people in classroom when I actually ran that. So what it is here is that people are watching a sort of a basketball game. So the only thing that this game had to do with basketball was just the basketball ball. So we have team in white shirts and a team in black shirts, right? So the audience watching this is told or is requested to count the number of times the team in white shirts are passing the ball to each other. So you're watching this game and you go 1, 2, 3, 4, really busy, really busy. Meanwhile, this huge gorilla walks onto the court, waves his arms, claps its chest, does everything gorilla does, and walks out. At the end of once everybody has counted the balls, the game is ended, the researcher asked the audience, "Did you notice anything unusual?" Now here, in this game, when you read underneath the pictures, they say 50% of people didn't see the gorilla. That's a huge result. Now, when I ran it in a smaller population, I had 21 students in class. I think one, maybe two, you can argue with me, but no more than 2 people.
No more than 2 people. Yeah.
And obviously I said to the student, "You're autistic." Right? It was a joke, but there was a reason why I made this joke, and the students understood it because we've done a lot of work on that. Autistic person has one problem, which is discerning. Autistic person cannot disregard input. Autistic person absorbs it all, and therefore they are always in pain, right? In pain. They can't look at your face because your face is just, making so many changes. They just can't. They see everything. So, yes, But the regular person, normal person, let's call it normal, which is regular person, didn't notice the gorilla, right? Here, 50%. I've seen studies where actually 90% of people didn't notice the gorilla.
Mm.
I ran it with my friends. They didn't see the gorilla. So they were so preoccupied with one thing that they couldn't see the context around it. It's very interesting.
Yep.
I will summarize the point later on using Professor Jordan Peterson, right? But you can see that by focusing on one thing, everything else was deleted. Now, whoever hasn't seen that clip on YouTube, you must see it. It's hilarious. Totally hilarious. So you can notice, I think it's Martin or whatever his name is, that comedian. I'm not into celebrities, right? But it's a clip from the Pink Panther movie.
Mm.
And the Pink Panther wants to now become a spy. He has a strong friend. It's not an American actor. I think it's a French actor. I don't know. Look, you can get me on that one. But anyway, the French spy wants to go to America. The French agent wants to go to America and spy. He's got a very strong accent. So he came to this language teacher, and she's teaching him how to pronounce things American way. So I didn't want to play the clip today, but what I did, I clicked on transcript and I just got a little bit of a dialogue here. I will read it because it's funny. So here goes. She says to him to say, I would like to buy a hamburger. So he repeats. I wish Andrew was here because Professor Andrew Lian can speak French and he can speak English with a French accent too. I mean, he's got talent to languages. There are people like that. I'm not one of them. Rory Sussex, my PhD supervisor, was like that. I mean, where are these people born? Where they come? Anyway, so the French speaker says, instead of saying, I would like to buy a hamburger, he says, I'd like to buy an hamburger, because they don't pronounce the H, right? So I would like to buy an hamburger. Hamburger. She says, no, let's break it down. She says, let's do it slower, right? I mean, these are the techniques we use in class. And the point I want to make is look where they lead. And you've seen it before in your own context. I, she says, and he says, ah. And she said, I, he says, ah. She says, I again. So he says, ah. It's a comedy. It's very funny. Then she patiently moves on, ignoring his oddities. She says, would. And he says, would. Well, she's patient, corrects him. She says, would. And he says, would. Right. So this goes on. She wants to walk away. He says, no, we must try again and all of that. And it continues and never changes, right? So my point really is, other than inviting you to watch this hilarious discussion, is are drills good or bad? Right? So this is the typical situation, whether you would, right? We're thinking of the question, which approach to use. Now, just because it is funny and it doesn't work, would you get rid of the drills altogether? Now, you clearly can see now, but you need more arguments and more evidence and more understandings, therefore, to better understand the concept of the drill and what the drill is actually doing before you throw out baby with the bathwater. And just get rid of the bathwater, but keep the baby in. So, right, so we can get upset, oh, drills don't work. Get rid of the drills. Well, why? Right? Why? So the perception, so the first point I was making is about change being blind. Here, the French speaker is so stuck in his Frenchness, can't hear. It's not that he has an ear problem. he has this, what Andrew would say, Professor, he has a selection problem. He doesn't select from the speech what matters to an American speaker. The sound is coming in, but here something happens. The churning of the machine is going in a particular way that what pops out is not necessarily what was in the stream of the speech by the teacher. This is another point I wanted to make about the focus, the kinds of things that are happening in the world now. There's a lot of neuroscience research, and some of it is maybe not interesting, but there's a lot of interesting stuff, and especially produced by very famous professors who communicate their research through most mainstream science channels on YouTube, patiently and in an ongoing way. So I was listening to this Professor Maguire here. She did the research with London taxi drivers on memory, very famous research, and by now quite old. But we ignore it. So at this very moment, I don't want to talk about its relevance to language teaching, but I want to talk about what they discovered. I discovered we don't see the world as it is. We solve our perception is we see things that matter to us as we go, as we need to solve problems to survive.
Yep.
Right? So you don't, when you walk, you don't see the whole room. You see the path that you need to cover and the things that matter to do it successfully. So the point they are making is that perception involves an element of problem solving. It is an act of personal meaning. And what they did here, was asking the study participants. Some of them had I think amnesia, right? Some of them had amnesia and some of them didn't. So patient is the person with amnesia, and control 1 and control 2 groups are people without amnesia. Can't remember what was the difference between control 1, control 2. It didn't matter to the point of the study that I watched this like years ago, this particular podcast. So they were asked to, let's look at the first straw. The participants were asked to actually draw the bananas. And notice the patient drew the best bananas on the planet. Just like I said about the autistic person would have noticed the gorilla, right? They have this photographic memory where they see everything. But what happened when you look at control 1 and control 2, the bananas are not in your face because people see more than bananas.
Yep.
They see relationships. But the person with amnesia doesn't see relationships. All they see is bananas, right? So the research also shows that the person, remember how sometimes in language teaching we give people lists, a vocabulary list?
Now, all the time.
But I'm not against it. But what I am against when we do it because we believe in it. And we should have a stronger reason. Because once we have a stronger reason, we will know what lists to give them. Like, what connects the list? Topic? Well, I don't know. Right? So what I'm asking now is that a lot of techniques we use in classes per se might be good or not. But unless we have a rational evidence that supports this particular technique, we will then know what exactly to do and when. So list is good, but what informs the list? Intuition. Oh, here's your kitchen. In the kitchen, you have the kitchen sink, you have your oven, you've got your table, kitchen table, you've got your pot. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's the wrong list. Just because a topic holds it, it doesn't make it perfect. It just makes it standard. We've been doing this forever. Right. So people with amnesia can remember up to 15 items in a list without a problem. You try that. And I'll give you a list of 15 items, give you whatever very short amount of time, and then you just have to tell me what was on the list one by one. Can't. Because people without amnesia, they have a very busy brain. They do a lot of relation building. They do a lot of structuring, organizing, putting things into drawers. They don't just see the word. If I say kitchen, they think mother. They think, oh my
Yeah.
God, children, I have to cook.
Yeah.
Right? They see a lot of things. So here it was that the worst bananas were produced by the most normal people, and the best bananas were produced by people who actually had amnesia, couldn't remember. And the same with the bucket. So, because the person with amnesia had no problem to solve, all they had to do is to reproduce. Whereas a person who didn't have amnesia had a problem. Oh my God, there are pebbles. Pebbles, many pebbles. Bananas are on the pebbles. The pebbles are many, right? So bananas are squashed onto the pebbles. So, right, they're in the context of pebbles. They're not just bananas. I'll show you one other problem that people with amnesia have. And you show this picture to anyone, I don't know, I think to anyone in the world, or most people in the world, right? When you look at this, you think of what? Lala, what do you think of this picture? When you look at the coffee and the croissant, and it's obviously a Western concept, what do you see?
Well, it reminds me of a very nice breakfast at a friend's house in
Breakfast.
Darwin.
Exactly, it's breakfast. A
Very
person
nice.
with amnesia would have never come up with that, ever. So there's a framework, right? You see this and you think breakfast. A person with amnesia sees croissant, coffee, spoon,
Spoon.
serviette, whatever, right?
Yep.
So that's the problem. Doesn't organize. People organize. So they
Right.
solve the problem. What the heck do I see here? What's the problem here with perception? A person who is looking at this picture solves the problem. Oh, you're showing me breakfast. Oh, that's lovely. I want it. Oh, Darwin. Oh my God. I want to go back to Australia to get such a good croissant.
All right. I will.
Right. So it's a problem solving, organizing. Perception is about organizing, putting things in a
Yeah.
drawer, right? Structuring things. It's not about seeing, right? It's a reconstructive process, right? I've seen it consists of this and this, and I organize it in a particular way. The same when we were talking about this French speaker. It's a very interesting research by Chang, and what people in phonetics had known now. Well, Andrew had known this for since the 70s.
Yep. Yep.
In 70s. These people, I don't know, this is 2015 research, but I think it was already known in the 90s because we went to a conference where IT programmers were learning how to make a computer here, right? So that you can have machines that can actually transcribe your voice and can listen to your voice, speech recognition systems. So anyway, what Chang said here, it's very important that what we hear is not phonemes.
Yep.
We hear as a wave. It's hitting our ear, and it has features.
Right.
And what we do, based on our past, we play with these features in a way that we can make sense out of them. So when the French speaker was listening to an American teacher, the wave was hitting him, but he was playing with those features in a French way, right? So the cogs were going here in a French way, not in an American way. That's why funny things were happening. So the last clause here or sentence right on the bottom of the paragraph says here, so what those features are small categories that the brain combines to form the speech sounds of human language. So, you will see a lot of speech pathologists working, say A, say B, say whatever. It's not about A, it's not about B, it's not about C. It's about so many features. It's complicated. You see how this research that I'm introducing to you about why analyze an approach, the reason why I'm showing you all this research is for you to see how much stuff is there. And I'll show you a few more, but it's way more out there, and we will spend time learning about it in the context of uh, teaching and learning English, right? So I specifically didn't choose the very things that I know that Lala will use and other guests. I just looked at more generic evidence to show you how much interesting stuff is there. The point is, you might know about some of that. And we will, throughout these broadcasts, we will learn how to turn these abstract or abstractly looking evidence into something meaningful for us as teachers. It's very easy to say, oh, teachers do not use recent evidence, researchers are oblivious to that. Yeah, because there's another step involved, which is so how do you turn it? How do you make sense out of it for your own practice? Right? How do you turn it into something that you can actually use with students? So there are these features. And then, so what do I do? Right? So this is one of the questions we will be tackling throughout our broadcast. Oh, look at that. That's vision. Oh my God. Right? Brain 2. There's no such a thing like neuron, one object perception, right? Information is processed by mobilizing, and look at this, potentially infinite combinations of mutually reinforcing modalities. So I'll talk later on about modalities, but basically let's think of features at this very moment, right? Potentially infinite combination of mutually reinforcing, say, features. So when you look at things, you don't see your mother, you don't see a chair, you don't see me here. What you see lines, straight lines, crooked lines, vertical lines, all kinds of things you see. And you, based on your past, go, a person. Right? It's very interesting. So what? Well, so what is basically shows this how our past informs what we see. Perception is a reconstructive process, not the simple retrieval of a perfect holistic record. Oh, here's the word, here's the pronunciation, here's this. Now you should understand it, you should see it, you should reproduce it, right? It's a naive expectation that we had or have had for the last 200 or 300 years. I don't know how people were learning languages in Middle Ages, so I can't claim that we've been simple forever. But I do know that for the last 200 years, we were thinking that perception is about simple retrieval of a holistic record. The brain records information, right? Remember how people used to do these things that when the baby was still in the tummy of the mother, they would play the tapes so that the baby would learn. Perception is about problem solving. What would the kid in the stomach understand when they had no problem other than, am I hungry? Am I comfortable? Am I still alive? Right. Here is a very good one. And that's what perception is an act of personal meaning making, right? Because we reconstruct information and we do selections based on our past, and we do it in context. So context presents us with challenges, and therefore perception is there for us to deal with those challenges. So that's why Peterson says it's an act of personal meaning making. You can be in the same room, hear the same people, and actually come out with two different messages. So Jordan says, it does appear that rather than us existing in an objective world to which we attribute meaning, like the mother is with a child. I'm using this example from The Maps of Meaning, which is an example given by Jordan in that book. A mother doesn't say to a child, do you see this thing? It's a vase. And the kid goes, oh yeah, it's a vase. Or do you see this thing? It's an abyss. It's yeah. So now you know it's a fall, or it's a cliff, or it's a whatever. It's a table, it's a cliff, it's a vase. It doesn't work like this, he says. We do not see a world of objects to which we give meaning. What he says, we exist in a meaningful world, which means we exist in the world that we understand. That's why two people can see the world differently, because they live in a different world of meanings, from which we extract out, we remove the meaningless. You see, he's focusing more on that meaning is about ignoring, not including. That's very
Right.
interesting.
Yep. Yep.
Very interesting. Ignoring. That's why the autistic person is overloaded, because they don't ignore. They absorb everything. And then they have to hit themselves against the wall to reduce the pain, to focus themselves on something. So they focus on pain. We too, remember, like sometimes you might have had a headache or something, and you had a headache and you just press. So just because the headache is everywhere, so you try to press to sort of like release it, and at the same time just focus on one spot rather than all over the head, because it drives you nuts. So it's very interesting. Attributing meaning is not about naming things, but about ignoring meaningless, so that you can actually learn what makes your world meaningful.
Yep.
And we remove more than we integrate. Peterson and Lian for years, and whoever else had been saying, we remove more than we integrate. So meaning making is not about having a list, and this means this, although lists are good.
Yep.
It depends where, in my view. But so it's not about attributing things, it's about learning what makes things important for us, what's meaningful for us. So that's probably, I was thinking, why in the West for the last so many years, at least at university and I think also in schools, they changed assessment from repeat and reproduce to assessment being problem-based, because you recognize that perception is about extracting out the meaningless and broadening what's meaningful in your world. So a problem-based assessment task allows a student to reveal what's meaningful to them, as opposed to just reproduce what you say and 2 months later don't remember. I like that thing. I think Jordan must have said it, and it's in Lala's thesis, and it's also in one of my articles. I think I printed it in Vietnam because I had a relationship with the Ho Chi Minh University or somewhere, I don't know, some university, and Van Hien University.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe an obscure place to publish, but sometimes us as scholars have relationships, and we actually want to support universities and publications, and sometimes we publish, in maybe obscure places as well. But we're here to network and to help each other, not necessarily to just shine your flag in America and be totally unsupportive to your local region. So I found it, but I think I found it in your thesis. People do not perceive what is, but what things mean to them. This is so because people do not process signals, right? Because you would process so much, you would just explode. They process their success. I loved it. They process their
Lovely.
success, right? So when you walk into a wall, you just process your success.
Yeah.
You're working out how not to hit it again, right? So people process their success. I really like that. We will come back to all this evidence in practice later on. I'm just signaling to you what is out there. Why analyze and approach? Because there's so much out there.
Yeah.
There's so
Yeah.
much out there. And I want to complicate your world. I want you. I also wanted to make this broadcast interesting. I was thinking that maybe to leave this evidence for later, but I'm thinking it's like, you have
Mm.
you're a beautiful girl. Why why always chat online when you can actually meet in person and show your beautiful smile, right? So yeah, put these things out there now, right at the front. Why analyze? Because there is so much new evidence. There's so much
Mm.
new information, so much more information out there, and that's why analyze because there is information that can help us. We will be
Yeah.
learning how Lala was using evidence, how Andrew, how other people, right? How people use evidence in order to um, develop teaching environments or learning environments. Oh, this is the funniest. Now, I will come back to Krashen later on, but this really kills Krashen,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it's look, I watched it, first stumbled on Anil Seth. He's a
Yeah.
professor in some London
Mm.
university, something famous, right? Why would we know about him? Well, I sort of browsed through the internet, stumbled on that. So Professor Seth reported on research on consciousness. Why would you read about consciousness? I don't know, I did. Sort of like, then that's what research is. You kind of don't study just one thing. You let yourself see the world.
Yeah.
And then you talk to a mentor and you say, oh my God,
Mm.
I found so much, but I can't put it together. But we have international teams now, and we have this team that I'm building here through our podcast. Yeah, well, let's talk about it. Silly things, useless things. Okay, so what's happening here? And please notice the signal is coming to an eye, could have been coming to an ear, doesn't matter. But notice it's not going right into the brain. In fact, it's not going anywhere.
Mm.
Right? Might as well not happen. Not have happened. Right? So the conclusion here is that people respond to the world in relation to what they already know about it.
Mm.
So he says these top down, you see the pink things here inside of the brain,
Gentle.
these top down or inside out connections that convey predictions from higher levels from the brain to lower levels back
Mm.
out to the sensory surfaces. Yes, well, what it means is Damasio, actually, another person I'll point to. Damasio is Antonio Damasio. I think he's retired by now.
Yeah. Yeah. Please.
Anyway, Antonio Damasio worked at in California, in San Diego University, South Carolina or something, South California or something university. Anyway, University of South California. Anyway, he reported in one of those talks on YouTube. What happens when I talk, you don't hear. It goes to the top of your brain. The cogs are working, then goes back to your ear, to your sensory surfaces. Oh, Ania said this. Right? It's very funny. So it doesn't go to the ear, up to your brain, doesn't make matches with semantics, and doesn't, and now you know everything. It actually goes in here, gets processed through your cogs, through your English Indonesian or English Cambodian or I don't know, whatever, comes back, and you could swear. I just said it. No, I said it before. That's how fast it is. Now, stuttering is different, right? Stuttering has a delay mechanism there. Now, Andrew Lian might talk about it better, but there are some delays, and you hear yourself. I don't know, I can't remember that, but basically it was done to me, and I couldn't talk when I was hearing myself with a delay, so all that. But in our brains, it happens instantly. You could swear, I just said it. No, I said it probably a millisecond area. Your head was working really hard, popped into the ear after it processed it and said, oh, Ania said that. See how much is that? And I'm bringing it all here to you to learn about this evidence in case you didn't say it or hear about it before. So that you, when you find these things, put them in your PowerPoint, your own personal PowerPoint. Like I collected these things. Once I see things, I make photos of it and I write notes. I have my personal PowerPoints that then later on I use. And we can discuss it. You can come to our broadcast and you can talk about it, ask questions and so on, because a lot is out there, but sometimes we don't know its significance. That doesn't make it insignificant. It's just we don't know what to do with it. But it doesn't mean we should ignore it because in our world it is meaningless. Try import it and think about it some more. Perception is multisensory, right? So that's what is just features, and those features that from vision and from hearing, they work together. Apparently we're more visual than not visual. I think vision overrides hearing. So if I tell you I'm good, but your eyes are saying something else, then you actually use the eyes rather than ears. However, the ears are hearing even when you are just about to die. You still hear things. So anyway, the point is we are multisensory. We mobilize infinite combinations of mutually reinforcing modalities to make sense of the world, right? We connect things, process them, and so on. And then, comes out the solution. Solution pops out. So we are multisensory. What else? He's written about the multisensory perception. He's written this book. Antonio Damasio, he's the title. I think he published it in 1994. And what he said, in the past, there was an understanding that you can be either a logical person or emotional person, right? Now, this graph here shows clearly it's not right? This is a kind of like a pop picture, which says you're wise when you have the two aspects of your brain talking to each other. But what research is showing, if you can see the circle, which is the top view of your brain, what it does show these two strong lines which connect the back and the front of your brain. And basically, what happens is that your limbic system and your cortical systems are connected together, which means a number of things. I don't want to complicate it, but basically, your emotions are always involved in your perception, in your evaluation of what matters, not just logic. If your emotions are separated from your logical systems, you're a psychopath. Maybe not, but definitely you make decisions. That's an illness, and you make decisions. People who actually have that issue make decisions which work counter to their benefit, right? A psychopath will make decisions which counter their well-being, because when you harm people, eventually you harm yourself, right? So no matter what that person might be feeling, but also people who are not necessarily out there to get you, they might have also this connection broken. and they will go on particular spending sprees or whatever, because that interaction is broken. One dominates the other as a result. It's usually the limbic that persists, because the limbic system, which is the emotions, is older. Everything was built on top of it. But yes, so we have multisensory processing, and our emotions interact with our perception. Uh, Figure that out, what to do with that. So what you would say, what does it, how is that helping me as a teacher to teach students how to, for example, write an academic essay? Well, it's a good question, right? So when you, one of the things we noticed in Wahid Nasruddin's PhD, when he collected the data, we noticed, and I repeated this already in our first broadcast when I was talking, he found out that, so it's a lecturer from Cirebon University. Lala knows exactly the name of the university. What's the name of the university, Lala?
Uh, I is IAIN Nurjati Cirebon.
It's in Java, right? So what he noticed, that lecturers were afraid of asking questions. But when you see this thing, which is this connection between the logical and the emotional systems, you can ask yourself, so what does it mean to me? It's a good question to ask. Right? It's a good question to ask. So throughout our broadcast, we will be showing you how we translated these things. But it's not the end of it. Though, when I invented my own systems, I thought it was. Right, but it's not the end of it. It's just a fault of an inventor. You think, oh, that's it, because that's all you could think about, right? But then later on you become a little bit more humble and you learn that it was just a thing. All right, so that exists too. We have two hemispheres, right? Learning is about interaction between the two. Oh my god, what else do we have? Here are some questions from Lala. Was it from your thesis? I think I took it from your thesis, which is, so basically these questions I'm not going to read them now out, but basically these are the questions about so what? How to utilize all of that. So to summarize, I wanted to say that change is a transformation. We need to investigate how to effect change. This is very different than assuming this should do the job, right? And if it doesn't, then there must be a fault with the student, or I don't know any better, or something like that. Yeah, we need to investigate how to effect change, and we also need to investigate the scope of change. Because yes, you can transform students, but you can transform them into narrow-minded creatures, right? They can spit out the lists, vocabulary lists, grammar rules. But really, if you transport them to Australia, it's not that the Australians will not relate to that person. It's just that this person will not relate to their environment. And Australia is not just English speakers; it's multinational, multi-ethnic. And a lot of students in the first year, I can't remember whom I had in the first year. One of the students, from Indonesia, actually, not Lala, someone else in the past. And that person for a year kept saying, I have cultural issues, I have cultural issues, I have cultural issues.
Mm.
And it was so pronounced in that person. And that person spoke English very well, but not well enough. The transformation that they underwent when learning English was not broad enough. The scope was narrow, so narrow, that when transplanted to Australia, with their high score, IELTE score, right? That person couldn't relate.
Yeah.
So we need to investigate how to effect change and the scope of the change that we are effecting. And that scope requires evidence from the critical perspective, assessing the political relevance of what we're doing, and also feasibility of it in practice. How is it going to look like, and can it be done? Second point, I'll just leave now Lala with it. Lala, I want you to have a look at the key problem in currently used teaching. So we will be wrapping up now. We're going towards, we want to finish the first 2 points today and then summarize what we have learned today. So the key problem in currently used teaching methods. Now, I wrote lack of evidence because it's from my presentation, but I want to say what issue Lala has found that with current teaching methods in his context of research. I'll just go back now to his presentation.
Yeah, so I'm referring back to my thesis. Um, I'm fully aware that the change is very slow right here in my home country, Indonesia, because we are pretty much um, preoccupied by the ideas of knowledge transmission instead of knowledge transformation.
That's despite of the changes in the standards and in the
Right,
new national. Okay.
right. Yeah, we have lots of standards, but then I am now more aware that the change is very, very slow. And I think we still, use the very same thing. We push the students to retain and repeat, memorize things because they see language as a memorized experience, not as an embodied experience. And we never actually push our students to confront the relevance of what they are learning to themselves as citizens and professionals. So yeah, I think that is one of the key issues that we are now facing in my home
Actually,
country.
if I can interrupt here, sorry for that, but because I was supervising your study, but also for Wahid Nasruddin, I can actually point people to his thesis. He actually found it also in his data. So, for example, when your colleagues from all over Indonesia were creating unit, what we call in Australia unit descriptions, you call it course. Course
Yeah,
is in Australia like a program, the entire degree. Unit is just a subject. So, for example, they were teaching academic writing, or they were teaching listening for English level 2 or something like that. Anyway, that element of the impact of that role modeling, what you do in the class, remember, will be the pattern your students will take to school. Doesn't matter whether it's a university course. Learn whatever you role model, they will replicate. And the syllabi that Wahid, I mispronounced his name clearly. How do you pronounce his name? Wahid?
uh, Wahid, yeah,
Wahid, okay. So the syllabi that he analyzed didn't have that component, which
right,
is the so what for my students. Oh yes, okay, we will do this and this, but how's this gonna feed them in the future? Because we get when we write course descriptions or unit descriptions, we are so, sometimes, not all, sometimes people, or at least in his research, people get so focused on the thing they want to teach that they don't give themselves time to evaluate how they role model and what they role model, and is that a good thing, and will they actually make their students reflect on the model they were using in class, so that they can think abstractly about your practice, so
yeah,
they can analyze and take it one step further. Right? We're not as language teachers, we don't only teach, we also role model. So Lala,
yeah. So that's actually the paper that we analyzed back in Australia in 2019. So we have to read this paper very carefully because um, this person actually models writing in the perspective of one particular Halidayan perspective, where teaching in general and academic writing in particular is actually seen as a very simplistic uh, method. Well, in writing, he states that what you need to follow is the generic patterns, the lexical features, the cohesion, and other grammatical stuff that are inherently connected to the text. But but as I have been learning a lot from you and Andrew, well, actually, writing is more than that, right? Musical aspects are included, emotions are also included, and interconnectedness between the right hemisphere of the brain and the left hemisphere of the brain are connected. So writing and academic writing is literally a multi sensorial process. So I think when we view academic writing simply as the a repetitive practice, then I don't think that the students will understand in answering what actually makes good academic writing in their own
Okay, so I
perspective. Yeah,
think, if I can interrupt, Lala, so I think that that's a good point, but I think it's not necessarily what it's on the slide, and we need to be a little bit careful here because we want
yeah,
other
sure.
people to bash us over our heads and come back to us and say,
Hmm,
well, that's all right, it's multisensory. We may agree with your point, but how is that relating to the word critical?
hmm.
So is has right. So what you're criticizing here, how do you pronounce Cajona?
Chahyono, yeah,
Cha-
Chahyono,
Chayona,
Chahyono,
right?
right?
So what you're saying is that Professor Chayona wrote a paper on the concept of supporting students' critical thinking, right? A critical response, right? To text. So critical thinking, how to help students analyze text critically. But what you're saying is you didn't see the definition of what a critical response is. Is this what you're saying?
Yes, yes, that's my point.
So you think that maybe Professor Chayona actually took it for granted that we
I believe
understand.
so. Yeah, yeah. So in this case, in the teaching stage, the construction stage, that's the BKOF, the building knowledge of field, and also the modeling stage are inherent in the genre-based literacy approach. And teachers, keep pointing to the students. I think from stage 1 to 3 to join construction, teachers are pointing a lot, and then suddenly the students are asked to work independently. So the teaching learning process is more like, as the teachers, we have to point everything that the teachers think that they have to think, right? These
Okay,
parts of text, blah blah.
so if I can make it a little bit to summarize it, what you're saying is that the method that Professor Charna used consisted of 3 or 4 stages. And what you're saying is when you look only, you can't see his practice because you were not there in classroom, right? So, but when you look at the description of the stages and you look at the verbs, actually, SFL itself is actually inviting us to look at the verbs. Right? Are you an agent or are you a receiver or whatever? When you look at the verbs alone, which you highlighted here, all verbs are positioning the student as a receiver, not as an
Right,
information constructor, not as
right.
a problem
Meaning
solver.
maker, problem solver.
Right, so which is the evidence. Now we can start making these relationships between the context that I presented before, even just a few things we have learned today, right? Perception is about problem solving, removing what's irrelevant, introducing people. Well, it's vague what it means. Students were given, it's vague. We don't know whether it was teacher just pointing them to this is what matters. We are giving you what it is. So the students were not extracting out of the world what's irrelevant and determining for themselves what's an oratory text. They were told what's an oratory text, right? So that's very old fashioned. I
Right.
think I have no problem with a teacher saying, so now in groups, summarize what you have. We have a discussion in groups, we can present, then we can summarize in groups, then we can present again. And now we come out with our own definition of what's oratory text, right? Because we've observed examples and we've made decisions on the basis of whatever in relation to whatever problem we need to see. We need to have a look whether oratory text is actually useful for us, right? So we compare it with another genre and see that. So you don't understand something unless you actually compared it against other things, right? So I
Right.
often say it's good to get the bad boyfriend first, because then you can
Mm.
tell the good boyfriend. If you always have a good boyfriend, you think every boyfriend is good. And you're picky and choosy and all of that stuff. So right, so the process of actually understanding here is not integrated in a way that you would be satisfied, that it involved critical reflection on the part of the students for them to make a meaningful um, recognition or understanding of what one genre is and what it is not, right?
That's right.
So lecturer highlighted, lecturer explained all the time. So now we might be doing uh, uh, um, we might be unjust to Professor Cherno, right? We
Yeah.
could be.
Yeah.
But this is a lesson for us all. Paper is patient. And sometimes we write things that shouldn't be there, right? If we want to show that our students were actually making critical selections, that we were all modeling critical thinking.
Yeah.
So then, right? But it could be that that Professor Cheruna was modeling critical thinking using particular model that actually wasn't about critical thinking. And that's what your argument is, right? Because when we look at stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3, you will point us to those stages now. At this very moment, from the description, the way Professor Cherno worded it, the student is very passive. We
Yeah.
put them in a passive role, and then we hope they will be critical,
Mm.
asking questions. Asking questions is not simple. And also standing up for your position, right? Arguing, um, creating something else. Hard tasks.
This is the third stage, right? So joint
Second. This
construction.
is the
Yeah.
second. Oh, yeah, third. Right. You're on
The third.
stage 2,
Yeah.
what you said.
In manuals and plans, teachers usually, put the first and second category differently, but they are the same actually. So yeah, again here the lecture is um, pointing because referring to the elements such as the schematic structures again and again and linguistic features. Beside that, the lecturer provided scaffolding of the material to the students in constructing a text and organizing idea. So
So
I
we
think
know,
it's yeah,
yeah, we know what the teacher was doing. We just don't know what the student was doing.
that's true. Yeah, yeah. And so this is the highlight from my thesis. I think we referred to Latour, 1999, and also your work, I guess. Yeah. Um, Critical thinking is defined as an exploration of what one knows in contexts that can reveal ambiguity in that knowledge. I think this is a very, brilliant definition of critical thinking that I have found while learning with you in Australia. Because, you know, um, critical thinking here has been defined in a very narrow sense. You simply follow what the linguist says, and that's it. If you do this, then you are a critical learner, but actually, it's not. Because what I have experienced in Australia is that from day one in Darwin, I kept asking myself whether the knowledge I have acquired is still relevant or not. Is there new ambiguity? And I had to raise new questions every single day, just not to confirm my knowledge, but to 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 be self-doubtful about myself. I think at that point, that's a very good definition of critical thinking. And then, yeah, I think I also highlighted how writing is taught in the English language teacher education department. We don't read a lot. With actually, I mean, the students are not encouraged to read a lot, to write a lot systematically. And I think from Professor Yazid's works, we also learned that we actually put a very lower standard in academic writing here in Indonesia. And it happens in Indonesian language department and also in English language department. And yeah, and even Kaplan and Baldauf back in 2003 also discovered that in my country and in other countries in Pacific regions, explicit instruction in the teaching of writing is rarely addressed in pre-service education. So I think that's a big hole that we need to address in English language teacher education at the moment. So that's my point.
So you've got some other slides. That's referring to the next section.
Yeah. I just want to point out that the writing is not merely following the recipe, right? As Violotto mentioned, because we need to understand why and how good writing actually looks like by embracing new evidence of learning in this context. So I think that's the thing I can share.
So I will talk about my perspective of what's currently an issue in current teaching methods, and obviously a lot of things that Lala said, or evidence or issues, will be similar, because obviously this is my area of work. There's a point I wanted to make. I just don't know where to stick it, so we'll just move on. So basically, all my discussion on this point will cover the issue of evidence. So while Lala was talking about asking questions, right? What's the job of the learner? In all the system, it could be good, but what's the job of the learner? In fact, when Lala did his PhD, it's very interesting. Usually you go to your PhD, you should select your supervisor thoughtfully, but very often it doesn't happen this way. Very often we are sent to some university, or we feel lucky. Oh my God, someone accepted me there and there. And you just go. And it's very interesting that if you go to Melbourne or Monash or Wollongong, you are likely to work in systemic functional linguistic approach.
Right.
Nothing bad, nothing good about it. The question which I will raise in my presentation is, as opposed to what?
Yeah.
Right? And how do we, so when you choose the method, very often in the presentation I'll just make now for 5 minutes, is the question is, what motivates, or what motivated the choices? What evidence motivated the choices? And it was very interesting. Lala was already, when I heard of Lala was already going somewhere down south to Australia, something university. And I get this email from Lala like, why would I want to study with you? I don't.
Yeah, I remember that.
We had this discussion, and he gave me all the reasons why he's for the method of systemic functional linguistics. And my question was, that's very good. Where's the student in all that?
Yeah.
And today, Lala's conversation with us was, where's the student here? What's the role of the student? What's the student doing? We say he's thinking critically, but we have not evidenced that in our descriptions.
Right.
So we can produce a lot of talk, like Lala was saying, or just put some new references, and it will show that we have an updated curriculum.
Mm.
Well, it's just cosmetic. And sooner or later, it's going to bite us. So I look at one of the graduates from Melbourne University, and I did look at the critical thinking process here. So this particular paper, I think it's 2016. And anyway, one of the things when I teach how to write, especially academic text or argumentative text, we use sometimes short text, sometimes we use
Mm.
long text, but abstracts are fantastic, right? So I will not conduct an analysis of this abstract. But when I was reading this, and Lala has a trained eye, he knows what I would be looking for. But it's very interesting. First of all, the first thing that strikes me here is the transitivity system of systemic functional grammar developed by Halliday was utilized. So basically, they applied this model. But they don't say why. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's the problem with missing evidence. Because then when this person uses Halliday, this person uses Brunner, this person uses someone else born 300 years ago, and so on. Halliday produced his stuff in the 90s. That's 30 years ago. All of that is ignoring research that I have shown in the beginning of this presentation. Halliday couldn't know it, and plus Halliday was not a pedagogue. He was a descriptive linguist. So the question I have here is, why was Halliday's model applied? Was the reason pedagogic? And if so, what was it? Because it's not given. Or purely linguistic. In terms of linguistics, I evaluate students' work as such, following Halliday. However, I have no idea whether it has any pedagogic value when working with research students, because I don't have evidence on how to translate my description into pedagogic practice. That's honest work. But here we have a different situation. We use the transitivity system without a rationale why, and therefore what someone like me who teaches academic writing should do with it. So I don't know whether the paper and its conclusions were to help me to effect change in students, or it was just an abstract talk. Maybe useful for the linguists, but for me, I mean, there are many language models in the world. There are many second language acquisition models in the world. Right. So that was missing. Now, one thing, the reason why I highlighted here or underlined the word theories, remember, Emilia writes here that she's analyzed some theories underpinning her study. Well, that's not what happened. I read that article several times just to make sure I am not imputing anything into it. There were no theories with evidence outlined in the study, because you would think the theories would be about rationalizing the transitivity system or its relevance for her study. It's nothing like that happened. What the theories, they weren't theories. They were just basically discussion papers that were saying how students' work should look like, what it should contain and what it doesn't contain. That's not a theory of, I don't know, academic writing. That's just what every supervisor knows. You should have these things. And if Halliday says, oh, well, this is how we describe language, and in terms of this description, this is what you don't do, or you do and you don't do these things. These are just descriptive statements. You could have just as much counted verbs or counted prepositions, right? for the description to have a value, you need to produce evidence that it matters to pedagogy. At this very moment, the model only, the relevance of the paper is, I don't know, to the people themselves who advocate for this model, but it's kind of like a tautology, which is, this is important because I say so, because Halliday invented it, so it's important. It just basically shows how the particular text of a student, how it looks when mapped on Halliday's model. That's all. So there were no theories underpinning the study analyzed. All we had was statements how the study should look like, and in terms of Halliday, what the students appeared to be doing and appeared not to be doing. That's all. So this is how sometimes papers can mislead us. But the paper is actually in linguistics or applied linguistics, but it's not in pedagogy because it doesn't have any pedagogic evidence.
Mm.
Let's have a look what I have here, because I don't remember it that much because I did it yesterday. So when you want to teach critical thinking, so Lala obviously was with me back when. So I've changed since. I had other PhD students who ask me difficult questions, and I also teach undergraduate students who give me hard time too. So when you invent something, you think you're really good, you're on top of the world, and then when you look around, you find out you're just on the bottom
Yeah.
of a volcano. You're just under the ground, and you were thinking you were on Mount Everest, right? It's terrible. It's an ego beta. It just kills your ego.
Right.
Anyway,
Yes.
so where I got with all of that was by accidents, and also by having more time to think about things. What evidence? We need to provide evidence. At least I can do it, and I do it. Provide evidence that supports the process of teaching critical thinking. It's not. I mean, we can say it's about generating conflict in one's beliefs, right? Looking for evidence or looking for arguments that can generate conflict. But it doesn't have a process, it's just a description. You need to feel uncomfortable. So that's what Lala was saying. You just need to make a student feel uncomfortable. That's critical thinking. But how? Do you have tools that can generate that discomfort? What about there's a saying in a by famous author, John Ralston Saul. He Saul. John Ralston Saul wrote this book, Voltaire's Bastards. I'm not swearing, he wrote that. And he asked the question, if you have 10 geographers in a room who think that the earth is flat and they talk to each other, what conclusion do you think they will reach? They are in that echo chamber, right? They reinforce each other. You need a process that you can follow to help you identify discomfort, another perspective, another evidence that can generate in you this, may or may not, but has a potential to generate this discomfort. Now, I'm pretty comfortable with what I have, but I know in 5 years' time I'll change my mind or do something else. But at this very moment, I've been using this with my doctoral students and also other students and in my research projects, right? I used evidence from neuroscience. I think the person who invented this evidence has no idea, but it can be used as such, right? It's Ramachandran. So, but anyway, V.S. Ramachandran I use, but, right? So he developed something that he used to reflect some things. I used it to support, I used the same evidence, but now to support another process, right? Another analysis. So, yeah, it would be very good to have evidence that can provide us with a model or with a process to generate critical thinking in our students. So that will be interesting. What I found also very interesting that, and as a mentor, as a researcher, I don't know where I saw it first time in my lab. To me, it just jumps at me straight away. Professor Emily wrote the whole paper, and right at the end, just literally like almost last sentence, she threw in this underlined text, the importance of explicit guidance.
Mm.
I'm not disputing it. I don't
Mm.
know. I don't have time to dispute it or agree with it. The point is, Professor Emily didn't
Amelia.
produce any evidence. Emilia,
Mm.
Professor Emilia didn't produce any evidence explaining the concept of explicit and demonstrating in terms of evidence why it has a potential to work. Maybe something else is going wrong. Like I am saying here, there is no evidence regarding the process of critical thinking in her paper, right? So that's what I'm saying. So there could be many things happening in students' thesis, many things. Could be that the thesis is too short to allow for critical thinking. You only have 7 pages. Our students, undergraduates, write 10, 12, 15 pages
Yeah.
assignments, 2 of them per semester. So you can see that this undergraduate thesis could be too short, could be just that. I don't know. I don't know. Those were PhD theses, so they were long. Sorry for that. But what I'm saying is, could be many reasons. But one of them is, for me, there was no evidence on the basis of which the critical process was claimed to be supported. Now, but to jump to this conclusion, pedagogic conclusion, Professor Emilia felt she had to produce some advice, but you can't produce an advice right at the end of the paper with a word that was introduced only in the last paragraph of the paper. Because it's like she could have written the importance of drills, would have been just as powerful, right? Or the importance of implicit teaching, just as powerful, because it doesn't have any evidence. What we had was Halliday's description, and then we had this conclusion that Halliday could be taught implicitly, not just explicitly. I'm not saying what's better because it's not my point today, but my point is you just don't do it. You just don't have an afterthought. If you didn't talk about pedagogy, which I also said before, Halliday's model was not justified. So now to make a connection with pedagogy, Professor Emilia just threw in this thing from nowhere. Could have easily said the importance of drills. And who knows? It could be good. Okay, so we don't have much time now to talk about it. You can look at things yourselves when you review this PowerPoint, on YouTube or wherever. But there's this person who advertised his blog. Somewhere I found him on one of the Facebook groups where I belong. And he looked at Krashen, and that was, that was his conclusion here on the bottom. If input is the real driving force, right, then we are duty bound to provide optimal input in our teaching, and this may mean to increase the amount of stuff we give to students or of tasks, right? Overload them because that overloading will be the optimal. Like, how did he get there?
Oh.
What's the optimal? What evidence says that this is optimal? If we are change blind, giving more speech to the French speaker of English, it's not going to make any difference. He's going to still say hamburger. Right? Say hamburger, 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 hamburger. It's going to go like that. Say it 300 times. Well, it doesn't matter. We've all done that, right? As students and as teachers, right? We've done that all the time. So the thing was here is that this person, Willie Renandia, didn't say But is input the driving force? You see, didn't turn the if, the condition, into a question. But is it? What tells me it is? Right? That's a thinker. That's a researcher's question. Is it? You could write a whole PhD thesis on the question of, is input the real driving force behind language learning? You don't have to do any research. You can, but you don't have to. You can just do literature review and explore interdisciplinary evidence, wondering if that's what's happening, right? So, but people are scared. Right. So my question would have been look at point 4. What if input is not the driving force? Remember how the input, the pink arrow, was going into the person's head and it wasn't going into the head? So
Yeah,
what does
yeah.
it say about input? Right. Now, number 3 here, my response is small load easier to lift? Because you gave more, does it make it optimal? So people come up with all these ideas, and because they are prominent, maybe on some language learning page or somewhere, all of a sudden, the entire country of people that read it reproduce it, and it becomes the method. So I've got some other things, like the interaction hypothesis by Michael Long. By the way, I just learned that Professor Michael Long has died, so I wasn't quite within his paradigm, but it's sad to hear that he has died at quite young age. So again, this interaction hypothesis, I want to run away from our SFL and look into some other second language acquisition theories. In students, as I many friend, what makes the teacher's correction, say in this particular article, any good? Always with stipulate. We are thinking, okay, that was 1989. Some of the research or evidence that I draw on was already present, but maybe not so universally. Today, a person saying that I'm using interaction hypothesis based on no evidence from neuroscience is actually doing research which is so old that I, as a reviewer of articles for journals, I don't know what to do with it. I don't want to hurt a person. I know that many people in America still do this research, totally in oblivion to research that is done in neuroscience and in cultural studies and God knows where else, right? So there's this stuff that I signaled or flagged in the beginning. And then I get a paper. So this one was 1989, but people still do interaction hypothesis stuff. And what do I do with that? No evidence from neuroscience. Do I just basically recommend not to publish? And I know also that other people in America get published doing this kind of research in total oblivion to research from neuroscience. I don't know what to do. I'm stuck. I want to support the student. I know that this is a legitimate research because it's still done somewhere else, but it's irrelevant today. And the student or person publishing the researcher is not actually evidencing the relevance in terms other than just one hypothesis. Oh, I think if you have a discussion with a student, that will help. How do you know that? So these are the sort of things. So summary. Okay, let's summarize. Lala, okay, we will summarize. We are change blind, basically. That justifies our accents. That justifies our collocations in English. Sometimes they don't come out very good. All kinds of things. Perception is a reconstructive process. It is not a retrieval. It is about meaning making. It is about solving problems, right? We don't see everything. We see what's relevant in the current context to us in a given moment to solve our life. People respond to the world in relation to what they already know about it. I'm just looking into multisensory now. Perception is multisensory. Our logical systems are not separate from our emotional systems, and learning involves interaction between the left and right hemisphere. And what Jordan Peterson quite nicely frames, he says, learning involves transformation from low resolution, so I don't really know, into high resolution structures, which is I know, right? from I kind of vaguely think to I now know. I have it all covered. I can do it asleep, right? So this would be a summary for today. We went a little bit long today, maybe not so long as last time. Oh yeah, but just about to hit 2 hours. Okay, so Sapoko, what you wrote, I'll just flag it because it's nice. Thank you for that. So Holiday will cry a river. No, I think we need to make a distinction between a linguist and language teaching, right? What Holiday, he wasn't a language teacher. He was a linguist. He described a language in a particular way. Then in the 90s, this particular description was uncritically applied to pedagogy, and uncritically meaning without exploration of evidence that was already available then, because I wrote my PhD in 80s, 90s, right? So I already understood the principle, which is, and there was work by sociologists like Professor Pierre Bourdieu in sociology was writing that what you see is not what you get. And oh no, what was he saying is that, but basically the evidence he was providing from sociology, talking about perception, he was also talking about the difference between the theory and practice. Theory is a perspective on practice, but it's not practice. So you can talk about how to ride the bicycle, but you still have to get on the bicycle and maybe use some of the hints that someone gave you, but you still have to personalize it in relation to the problems you are experiencing while now on the bicycle. Oh my God, where's this pedal? Where is the pedal? He said there will be a pedal on the bottom. I can't feel the pedal. I mean, I tried to ride the motorbike, and my students from Asia are laughing at me. I can't. I couldn't find this and the other thing, and then I had to do something else, and my leg wasn't going, and I had these shoes that were not allowing me to feel things, and it was just a nightmare. And you could have told me that the pedal was on the bottom. Yes, you can tell me it's on the bottom, but my foot still has to find it every time. So there was evidence in the 90s and in the 80s and already in the 70s, but basically what happened, instead of doing what and they quote Pierre Bourdieu, by the way, in their writings, because I read them. In fact, I worked with them in the same university, the people who were developing the SFL model in Australia. So we were all in the same university at some point. So there was evidence. They were talking about Pierre Bourdieu. Pierre Bourdieu clearly said that theory is a perspective on practice. It's not a practice. A painter can tell you how he painted a picture. Now you use that description and paint the same. Try it. Right? So it's two different things. So Haley would not cry. Haley would be probably happy. And what's also, thank you for that point, Sopo, because what it does say now, what currently has been done in language teaching was that we take a theory and we move it to practice, but there is no feedback onto theory. So consequently, language teaching very often is seen as an irrelevant discipline because it doesn't contribute to the big tree of knowledge. Well, now I just did. I said, well, maybe you have to look at practice through different theories or through different evidence so that you can now create models for supporting language teaching and learning, and then see how what comes out, how it will feed back to the big tree of knowledge. Maybe we will learn something. So, for example, I developed some things, and although the linguists have, say, descriptions of text, very complicated descriptions of text. I mean, since I was in my 20s, I could never, ever, ever pass an exam in holiday because I understood it. Now, I understood it the moment I was studying it, but next day it was vague. It was something that was so many things, so many descriptors, so many, like things floating. And obviously I was studying this from the perspective of pedagogy, and I was wondering, and anyway, I have reduced the whole thing into 6 steps, and I'm claiming that every text has the same 6 stages of text production. Every text. Now, obviously, when I met Lala's daughter, who was 10, a brilliant 10-year-old, looks at
Thank
me.
you.
We're having a dinner. I'm thinking I'm getting rid of them, waving goodbye to them. Leave me alone. You've tested me enough. No, the 10-year-old was smart. She said, look, I did this recipe. Do you like it? I said, yes, beautiful, beautiful drawing, beautiful. Where's the moral here?
Yeah.
Right, because I say that every text has a moral. So she was good. She said, where's the moral here? So obviously I found the answer. I would have found the answer no matter what, because I'm an academic, right? We always find an answer. But that was a good question to question me so that I could actually explain to her how my model actually even fits even something like a recipe. So now it is the practice that was informed by evidence from neuroscience and different models of the different disciplines that I then developed that actually led me to develop the model that now basically says, look, people, maybe the linguistic models of Halliday are great for linguistic analysis. I will never question that. But maybe for the context we need it, this model is pretty good. And when I apply it to abstracts, when I apply it to people's work, it actually helps me see lots of things that are absent in those texts and helps my critical thinking. So that and some other things, right? So no, Halliday would be happy. He never claimed to be a world-renowned language teacher. He wasn't. He was never a language teacher. He was just a linguist, and he was a professor of linguistic studies. He was not the chair of language teaching or of education studies or something like that. So we need to see a difference. I just look at the last one here. I don't know what it's saying, so I just look with all the old perception about systemic function in Indonesia. Now, yeah, how can we innovate? How can an innovative approach alter the old paradigm, and how fast? Um, I think this is the point we were making before. Lala, do you want to respond? Because I'm just talking too much. I have my response, but maybe you can respond to it.
All right. I think you highlighted the very same person, Sapoku. I don't think that's the real name. So the answer will be that's dependent on us as the language educator. The word change is is never there in our curriculum, but we actually have the transformative learning standard enacted by the government. So I think if we do some more and more innovative research in the field of English language teaching pedagogy, if we can find the right mentor like Ania Lian and Professor Andrew Lian and many other people that are working in the non-TESOL tradition, then we might um, be able to accelerate the change or the transformation itself. Maybe that's the only answer I can have, Anya.
Well, this is interesting. My supervisor was a linguist in my PhD study,
Yeah,
and but he was a linguist with a difference, Professor Roland Sussex.
yeah.
He was able to live with the fact that we never agreed.
Mm,
So you don't have to always be with Anya Lion, because I can't mentor 5 million
mm.
students.
Or
But
100.
um, but what you do need, if you are lucky enough, is to work with interdisciplinary evidence and with people who can bear it.
Mm,
If your mentor is dictatorial, knows only one way, and then it's hard. Then it's hard. But I think developing strong hind legs, the hind legs of the elephant I learned in Thailand, right? Developing strong legs through your own engagement in learning about evidence and how to work with it. I think it's the key. And I don't think that anyone in Indonesia will deny the value of the strength of your research and thought. I think
mm.
I think policies sometimes are made carefully because people are worried that there's too big a gap between progress and where we are today. So
Yeah.
they're kind of trying to find a middle ground. But when you
Right.
are innovative and can argue the point and can present it, publications, conference papers, broadcasts like this one, come and talk here, um, offer yourself as a guest. We will include you. We'll talk about the topic that interests you, not us.
Mm.
We
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
talk about it, and we will learn from you, and you will learn from us. So all
Right.
this making yourself visible and participating gives you strength,
Mm.
and it gives everyone strength, and that's how
Right.
we learn. Otherwise, we don't learn. We don't even reproduce. We just
Mm.
pretend. So that was a good point. All right, so we're 2 hours. Looks like that these broadcasts will just have to be 2 hours because there's no way
Oh
we can
yeah.
fit everything in
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
hour. But that's all right. People can, when they watch us later on, they can scroll, fast forward or whatever if they have no patience. Anyway, I hope that we achieved today the goal we had for ourselves, which is start to um, introduce you to problems in relation to the current context of research, not just in TESOL, but the research around us. We are humans, we're not just language learners. Right? So that was our goal, and we'll progress further so that we can one day, when we talk about the curricula that we design, it will all make sense.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe you can come here and help us question our own assumptions, because nobody is perfect and we will
Yeah.
all learn. So thank you so much. Thank you for making time today, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. We'll continue that subject of why choose an approach or why evaluate an approach.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, guys. Okay, I will be now
Thank you.
closing the live broadcast.
Thank you, everybody. I'll see you.
And thank you, Lala.
Thank you, Ania.